Hey guys, this is a DIY tutorial on how to add smoke to your GPStar kit. I'm going to do a really quick rundown on how to solder for you people who don't know how. And you have a smoke kit by Wasteland Industries. You will find that a lot of parts of this installation video applies to that as well. So let's get started. For the kit itself, first thing you're going to need is a vape pen. Make sure you get one that is draw activation and not push button. Very important. A blower fan. Also 5 volts, preferably get one that's shaped like this. A low voltage white LED, I believe something around 3 volts and 20 milliamps is preferred. Some 3D printed parts. These are created by our team member Dustin. If you don't have a 3D printer, you can purchase these from our shop. And of course, wires and JST XH connectors for the various components here. A fish tank air pump. Make sure you get one that's 5 volts max. This is kind of a rule of thumb that goes with all our components. Try to refrain from going anything above 5 volts. Our board can only take about 2 amps per pin. So if you get something that's like 12 volts, that might be about 3 amps and that could blow the pin. Try to refrain from going anything above 5 volts. It is not a good idea to attach a vape cord directly to a board as the amperage would be too high and that could blow up the board. And some electrical tape. And now for soldering, what you're going to need is of course a soldering iron. Nothing fancy like this, a basic one will do. Some solder. Make sure you get good quality 60/40 rosin cord. That's very important that you get the right kind here. Some heat shrink tubing and maybe a lighter to go with it to shrink the tubes. And some wire strippers. You can get away with using scissors if you're careful, but this will make the job a lot easier. And this is sort of optional, but some solder cleaning wires that will help remove excess solder. And this is purely optional with some resin flux plate paste. This stuff will help the solder melt together a lot easier if you're having a tough time with it. And also optional, but very useful, is some helping hands. You do not need a big one like this. I actually regret buying this one. This one's a little bulky and takes up too much space. You can get a nice small one with just 2 hands, and that's more than enough. But the good thing is, it turns out this is canon to Ghostbusters. If you look closely at Egon's workshop in Afterlife, you can see this in the exact model in the background. Okay, so quick and dirty tutorial by a novice user myself. This is going to be soldering 101. So first thing we're going to do is take our wires and snip our ends. For the wires, you're going to need to cut 4, roughly 90 centimeters in length, preferably in various colors like this. And then 2 wires about 25 centimeters in length. And then you can go online and buy a pack of JST XH connectors. We'll need 2 of them. As this blower one comes to 1, we'll be snipping this off. So first thing we're going to do is take our wire cutters and snip out all the ends of the wires. So these are 22 gauge stranded wires. So I'm going to be looking on my right side here at 22. And just like that. And we're going to do that for the rest. Okay, so let's get on to the actual soldering. The first thing you need to do is heat up your soldering iron. Depends on what model you have. It could take a few minutes. And when your soldering iron is heated up, we're going to do something that's called tinning the end. We're going to fully cover the end in solder. That would help to protect the iron itself, increase the longevity of it, and also makes the soldering iron stick better. So I got a dab on it, and I'm just going to clean it off in the coils here. And what you want is your tip to be nice and shiny. So doing this process will make that nice and shiny. And we can go ahead and start soldering. Take our wire. And there is a hole here, but I'm unable to thread the whole thing in, but that's okay. I'm going to thread some of it. I'm just pushing down on the wire to make sure it wraps around it nicely. And then I'm just going to take my solder and my iron. I'm just going to touch both and melt a dab onto it. And I'm just gonna keep it there, and you can watch as it like heats up and melts around it. Apply a little bit more to make sure it's perfectly connected. give it a tug, and that feels pretty good. So let's do the same thing with the negative end. Again, there was a small hole. I was able to fit some of the stranded wires through, but not all. And that's enough for it to hold there. For the pump tip itself, it might take a while for the solder to actually stick to it. So you might have to leave the tip touching that part for a little bit longer than the stranded wires itself. And you just want to leave there until you see it start melting and getting shiny and liquidy. And then, yeah, that's not quite there yet. So I'm going to reapply some heat. Okay, give it a few seconds to let it cool. Okay, there you go. Much better. And now to cover up the exposed ends, I'm going to apply some heat shrink tubing. So you cut a little bit off. You just want to make sure you find the one that's just bigger than the wire itself. Because of I came in an angle, it's a little hard to cover it up completely. Then take your lighter and just apply some heat nearby and watch it shrink. So because I came in at an angle, I wasn't able to completely cover the end, and when I applied some heat, it shrunk a bit, so that's a little exposed there. But I'm not too worried about this piece. I know these wires aren't going to touch each other, and there's nothing exposed nearby that's going to come into contact with these ends, so I feel perfectly safe and fine with the way this is. Okay, now take your other end of the JST connectors here. When I did some measurements, this length is actually more than enough. And this JST connector here is quite long itself. In hindsight, I probably could just have soldered these directly onto here. I probably didn't need these extra wires. That's my bad, but that's okay. I'm just gonna cut these ones shorter and solder to these anyway. So if you're watching this video and you got JST connector about this long, you can probably solder that directly to the pump itself. But depending where you decide to put the pump and the pen in the pack, that would determine the length of wire you need. So I'm just gonna cut these ones a little bit shorter. I could have just desoldered these and put these ones on, but I like these wires. These are silicone wires. These are a lot more flexible than these PVC covered ones. So I would prefer to keep these ones anyways. So I'm just gonna work on the red one now, red to green. So the green again is the positive lead, which is red. So once again, the green is the positive lead indicated by the red sticker. And we have a red end here, so that's where these connect. Before you do that, cut a bit of heat shrink tubing, thread it through the wire, and then you can go ahead and do solder. So what you can do is take your two helping hands and then bring them close together until they're intertwined, and then apply some solder and the soldering iron to it. Make sure you see the solder encompass the entire thing. And then let it cool. Let's see how we did. Okay, that seems like a decent connection. Move the heat shrink tubing up and then shrink it with the lighter. All right, now let's do the rest. If you need your other hand to hold on to something, what you can do is drop a dab of solder onto your iron and then quickly apply it. So like this, I'm just gonna hold these together. Apply the solder, let it cool, My finger's getting hot, ouch. And then there you go. The only thing is you can't leave a dab of solder on the soldering iron for too long and still expect it to apply, because it will melt the rosin core on inside the solder, and that is the special component to make things stick together. The pump is done. Moving on to the LED, I decide to use white for the positive and yellow for the negative. How do you know which end is the positive and negative? If you take a look, one is longer than the other. The longer end is positive and the shorter end is negative. So we don't need these legs to be this long. So once you've indicated which side is the positive, you can go ahead and snip it down a little bit. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be working with now. There it is, our LED is finished. 2 down, 1 to go. Oops, sorry, I forgot I stopped recording for the rest of the soldering of the blower, but at this point, doesn't matter, you can get the idea. And I have finished the blower, we finished the pump, and now we finished the LED. You can do some last minute double checking to make sure that is all correct. Make sure that the positive ends go to positive, negative go to negative. If you did make a mistake somewhere, if somewhere along the line the polarity is flipped around, what you can do is, if you take something flat, like this little screwdriver I have, a very small flathead screwdriver, you can push down on these little silver tabs. So how these work is that the little silver tabs inside stick out just enough that the white housing prevents it from being pulled out. So what you want to do is push down on those silver tabs to flatten it, and that should, yeah, that should be, then you should be able to pull it out. It should be able to clear it. So if you did make a mistake, you can just do that to both of these, take them out and flip them around. So pretend I took these both out, pretend I'm gonna flip them around. How you reinsert it is a little tab. Can you kind of see this? A little tab right there. So it's flattened and pushed in now. So we need to pull it back out. And the best tool for this job is using some thin tweezers. So you want to get under the tab and pull it up just a little bit, not too much. This one is particularly difficult because I flattened it too much. So it's kind of hard to get in and under, but we're gonna do it. There's no stopping us. So unfortunately for this one, I flattened it too much. So what I'm gonna do is poke it from underneath on the inside here. I'm gonna try to poke it out from that way. Yeah, there you go. That took a while. I had to play with it off camera, but once you got that pried back out, you can, but once that is pried out again, have it with it facing this way and the tab facing up, you just have to stick it back in. There you go. Connection is solidified again. And when you're done soldering, it's a good practice to apply a little bit of solder back on the tip and then clean it out so it's shiny again, and then you can unplug it. This will help protect the iron. So again, you'll want to apply a dab of solder at the beginning when you first start soldering and at the end, and depending how long you're soldering for, you might need to do in the middle. Okay, well, now that all the boring soldering is done and we've prepped the pack, this is where the fun begins. I have 1 meter of tubing here. This is more than enough. We're gonna need to cut off a little bit here to attach the pen to the air pump. So I'm just gonna start with about this much, see how that goes. This end here goes into the bottom, and it should be able to fit in nice and snug. Same with this side. And then this end needs to be connected to the mouthpiece hole here. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit into the mouth hole here. It really depends on which one you got, I suppose. But we do need this to be secure so no air leaks out. If you have some big heat shrink tubing, that would be ideal. Otherwise, I'm just gonna go ahead and give the electrical tape a try. So I was actually able to squeeze some of it in. I'm actually not sure how well this will work, but I'm still gonna apply some tape around it. I want to make sure it's really tight, airtight. Okay, so I taped it up as best as I could. And then we're just gonna test this out and see if there's any air leaking. So don't worry about the board connections just yet. I'll go through that later. I'm just gonna do a quick test. Awesome, it looks like that's working. Now I'm just gonna put my hand around this to see if I feel any air coming out. Try that again. So that feels pretty good to me. I think I might apply a little bit more tape around this side just in case. I might have felt a little bit of air. I don't think so, but I'm gonna do it anyways. I also realized I over taped this side. Now I can't even access the tube area to put in the juice in, so I'm gonna have to correct that. So let's get back to the other side of the table. So because I over taped it on the pen side, I'm just gonna go ahead and redo this. Okay, that's re-taped. So now I can still unscrew this if I need to and refill the vegetable glycerin into the tube here. Close that up. And on the other end, if I need to recharge this, this is the part that goes into the charger. Okay, now let's prep the pack. Take off the back of your pack, and we're gonna remove 4 screws. Here. And then lift out the back of the cyclotron. If you're lazy like me, don't want to plug all the wires, just be careful, place it aside, make sure it doesn't pull too hard on the wires or anything. And then we're going to remove the end filter cone with 1 screw in the middle here. And then gently flip it over. And I forgot to mention, if your bottom speaker is not secured onto the bracket with zip ties or anything, make sure you take this off before you flip it over or it will fall out. I'm guilty of always forgetting about this and it always falls off, and I risk bending these and I risk ruining the speaker wires. So don't be like me and make sure to take this off beforehand. It's now time to take your trusty drill and start drilling some holes in here. Luckily for us, Dustin made our job a lot easier by creating this template here. And with the words facing up, all you have to do is drop that in and then just drill into those holes. For this hole here, I'll be using a 5/16 drill bit. This one seems to fit perfectly into that hole. And the biggest drill bit I have is the 25/64. So that's what I'll be using for the little square here. All right, next step, take the cone and then take your LED and you're gonna thread it through the side hole until it comes up the middle here. If you have trouble lining up the LED into the middle hole here. What I did was just use this drill bit here. You just need like a small pen, or you just need something thin and long, and then you can just use that to help guide the LED into this hole. And then take your tubing, and I believe Dustin says in his instructions to put in about 1/2 inch in, so I think maybe somewhere like that. Doesn't have to go all the way apparently, and that should hold the wires in place as well. And then if you like, take some hot glue and secure the end, make it nice and airtight. And then unplug the other end, and then we can drop this into this hole here, and we'll start with the LED end and then the hose. And then just with the existing screw, we can screw the new cone back in. Now, next we want this piece to be facing up like that. So you're gonna take your hose and LED wires and feed it through. So it sits in there like this. And then lastly, take your blower fan, and sorry about the lighting guys, but see the square hole at the bottom? That needs to line up with the exit point on the fan. So that looks about right. And place the cyclotron back on. Okay, and double check everything. Make sure there's no wires being pinched. Make sure everything clears properly. And because my side on the left looks pretty crowded with the wires, it looks like there'd be more space on this side. So that's why I decided to make these wire lengths to be able to go around to the right here. So this will go on the upper side of where that pin goes, and then the rest goes underneath this. And then that will run along into the D-cell battery tray area. And then we'll get back to these wires later. First, let's double check everything. Okay, when you're completely satisfied that all the wires are clear, nothing's pinching, and the cyclotron is sitting well, go ahead and put the screws back in and secure the back. Okay, and moving to the top here. Like I said in my other video, you're gonna want to snip a bigger hole here for more wires. So one important thing to be careful of, and I just noticed this. This is the JST connector that came with my fan. And as you see, the red wire is on the right by default. While the JST connectors I purchased in a bundle to use, the red is on the left. So you gotta be careful, double check that. On the board itself, it does have the plus and minus labeled next to the connector, labeled next to the housing. So just make sure you line up the positive to the positive on the board. And as long as that's okay, you're good to go. If they are not lined up properly, just do the method I showed you before. Pop these out, flip them around, and pop them back in. So starting with the air pump, this one goes into smoke end filter, which is right here. And then the blower fan goes right next to it, end filter fan. And last but not least, the white LED. It's in this little section right here. It should say LED W. And on this one, it should say 5 volt or ground. So the red will go into 5 volt, the black goes into ground. And that's it. And you can take advantage of the D-cell battery compartment, like I said. And this is where your pump and your pen will go. I upgraded to the Redmond motherboard. And so that is how I will be accessing the pen whenever I need to charge it or fill it up. So the final step, let's flip it over and do a quick test to make sure everything's working.